Hello, it's Saturday morning. It's good. It's very, very good. And things are coming up. What is this and why is it coming up? Go away. Hi, welcome to the Art of Rock. This happens every Saturday here on this amazingness right here. So it's always on Angelspit's Twitch. Alex, I see you in the comments. Thank you so much, man. I look forward to it. We're talking about snare drums today. That's the Art of Rock. Follow Angelspit's Twitch. It's always there. This is made with Angelspit's Patreon. If you got a couple of bucks you want to throw my way each month, I'd really be grateful. And we can keep doing this crazy stuff. Also, Angelspit's new single is called Pay the Butcher's Bill. It's very nasty, and I'm proud of that nastiness. And after this, we're going to zoom on over to MTV TV. I should say Raid, because it's awesome. If you want to find some amazing bands, that's the place to play it, to find that. I want to jump straight into this, because this is such a cool subject. We are talking about snare drums. So, I'm basically throwing the floor open because there's so much awesome madness, hey Chris, to talk about with snare drums. If I was to start a topic, I'd say, what is an alternative to 2/4? And reminder, just count me in when you're showing me your demo so we can go, oh, that's cool. Floor's open. What you got? And your mics are live. Well. Ha.
Metal wires away from the head and cause a ping and impact. You just get a, and you can do these things with that hand that are up to the smack of the beat, between the smack of the beat, and push the time around in the feel. And when programming this stuff, if that's the way you're doing it, like I mostly do, these things are, if your snares are hitting velocity 120, 127, full, whatever, full deflection, these ghost notes can be down in the 10s, in the 12s of your MIDI velocity. And you'll still, even if it's not a multi-sample, of other hits, you'll still get that funk, that groove. So, man, I hope somebody can be more specific about which note divisions those are to put them on. But in a bit, I'll come up with some drummers to look at that'll demo this. So,
Awesome.
ghost notes.
Can I, that's awesome. Something I'm really getting into is 1 and 2 and is putting the snare on the 2 and instead of the 2. So in the verses it might be 1 2 3 4 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 like that. And then when it gets into the chorus it's 1 2 3 4. Ghost notes are really awesome. Libby, thank you. Thanks for the audio call, and also Rob, thank you very much as well. It's good to see you. I usually put them on the first, the second 16. So it's 1 2 3 4 ga ga, and then I'll put it on a 16th on either side of the 3, which is a really typical kind of Manchester funk thing. So it's 1 2 ga ga, 1 2 da da tha dung da 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 da. And you can put as much of that stuff in there. It's really good fun. Like you said, be aware of the velocities. Also be aware of unrequired chatter. Because if there's other musical things going in there, they're either going to get lost and stuff. But if you're doing those kind of really cool 16th grace notes, it's an excellent opportunity to also play with like crazy funk groove syncopation and pushing stuff towards triplets, and you start getting some really pretty subdivisions and funkity going on. Diana, come on in. Yeah, there she is. Raz, go.
I have one that's going to make Adam start talking, and that is the discussion between where Sting wanted the snare drums and where Stuart Copeland wanted the snare drums in almost every song. And Stuart is on record as being a pain in the ass because Sting was such a pain in the ass back. But he also said something about never wanting to put the snare on 2 and 4 and just always putting it other places. And he's got lots of examples of the snare on 1 and 3 and places in between and stuff. But I don't know. He sometimes ends up in the chorus just putting them on 2 and 4 like a rock and roller and walking the dog as it is. Yeah. But he's got lessons too.
Okay. Adam, he's thrown down the gauntlet. What you got?
Oh, sorry. I thought I was muted and I guess I'm not. Okay. I'm very with you. I love Stuart Copeland because he does that kind of stuff. Like he's one of those drummers that is like totally ear candy for a drummer. He does a lot of cool shit with the hi-hat too, like putting open hats in kind of weird places. Yeah. That brings a lot of the funk. But yeah, it's very easy for me to think of riffs where he's like, on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Kind of stuff. And then he goes and rocks it right into the chorus, kind of giving you those typical beats. But yeah, he does it a lot in the verses, man.
All right. Here's a really interesting thing I've been noticing about. I think it's really important, and this is a nice conversation. I think it's really important to have the snare, if you're going to dance the snare around a bit, to have it either hit the 4 or the 2. Because, or maybe the 3, I don't know, but it's hitting a beat. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like, ga, one, da, 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 ba, Raz, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, almost all of the genre stuff that we're involved in requires some amount of the backbeat. If you don't accentuate 1, 2, 3, 4, you're up. You're jumping when you're dancing. Your lift from the downbeat, the funk, doesn't exist, and it's hard to imagine the point, I guess, of releasing what I mean. I guess maybe as a composer, maybe somebody y'all agree, maybe that there's a different vibe. But like when I think of a fully completed song, always it's got the backbeat. My experimental stuff that may not like make it to be a what I hope is destined to be a classic listenable piece can eschew the 2 and 4 and put the snare drum anywhere, leave it out entirely, have lots of 16th notes with even prominence. But that rock and roll 1950s on 2, 4, 1, 2, 3 is where you get the lift. You get it's a rock song. It's a pop listenable radio tune, dance floor tune, headphone tune. Well, maybe headphones is more room for ambience, but you know what I'm saying? Like, does anybody else feel that vibe that like your finished songs, your fully convincing ones are the ones with a strong backbeat?
Yeah. Adam, I want to hear what you say on this.
Unmute. So I think there's a lot of great examples of songs that don't. Okay, so like one of the drummers that I think really broke the backbeat was Martin Atkins, right, doing the stuff with Pill. And Steve Perkins of Jane's Addiction, who I often wonder if he wasn't inspired by Martin Atkins and the stuff he did with Pill. There's a lot of great rock drummers out there that have and do use the grace notes and the off time beats very, very effectively. I mean, I think a lot of what we would classify nowadays as alternative rock has made good use of that. You know, I do agree. I do agree that how do I say this? Like pop music has its own kind of set of standards, and then we talk about music, right? Because like pop music is like a lot of a lot. How do I say this? A lot of good music does become popular, but a lot of music that is intended to be popular is very simplistic and uh you know, isn't very far off from like children's music really. And so I think a lot of the stuff that we're exposed to through pop music isn't maybe the best examples of musicality, if that makes sense.
Yeah, dude, that's great. Thank you, man. Razzie, I'm gonna go in after you, Razzie. Please go.
Yeah, well, this is still a thread from what you just said, and that was like talking about at least putting the snare on the 2 or the 4. But and then Adam, you mentioned, and there's lots of great songs, and I think right before that I said, and there's probably some songs, but I can't think of a single example of something that made it into like my favorite tunes TM playlist of all time, registered trademark. That doesn't do that. And I was thinking of ones that are toms heavy, but they still bring in the snare on the right beats. And I'm thinking of ones that are no drums for a while, but the chorus kicks in and they still backbeat it up. So maybe by the end of this hour, we can actually think of a solid example of greatest tune of all time.
Yeah, okay.
that doesn't do that.
I like that.
I'm working on it.
Actually, I
Been
want to
Caught Stealing by Jane's Addiction.
Hold on. Adam, what I want you to do is, I want you to think about club, electro-industrial club bangers. I just said bangers. I'm going to flip back to you on this one, and everyone, throw it open, where it's not 2/4. You know, hold on a minute. Okay, so my question here is that, how do you create something, and I know the answer to this already, how do you create something that is not, which is not mathematically, it's more creatively created? You know what I mean? Because I find that one of the first things when a track's not listening, the snare. What's the snare doing? Why is this boring? Because that's my problem, is I get really bored really fast. How can I do something different on this snare so that when it kicks to 2/4, the song starts beating? Yeah, and that's the thing, is that when you're doing a snare and it's it can get too much. You know, you get that little piccolo snare. I've got this great little 808 module snare, beautiful, but my problem is it's just always going, it's always dancing away out there, and I'm always end up cutting it out, cut, so it just becomes this really simple accent thing. Skinny Puppies, second track on Two Dark Park, not Viet, no, I can't remember the second track. Great fucking 808.
Spasmolytic?
No, that's the first track. Is it Tormentor? I don't know, but is the snare in that's fantastic. It's just this little dancing thing. Work on this list, Adam, because I'm going to pick your brains. Resi, I'm throwing it to you.
Yeah, I think that one trick to escape from 2/4 land, get a pair of sticks, get a practice pad, get a pair of sticks, get a trigger pad, get a pair of sticks, get a Korg wave drum, not the original one, they're too expensive, you'll never afford it or find one in good condition. And use something that's acoustically coupled rather than electronically triggered, because the nuance is, well, it's different. I mean, first of all, playing with sticks is a whole different trick than playing with fingers. Both are valid, both are super expressive, but you can break out of your habits certainly by changing the instrument a little bit. I probably have done more things with piano, keyboard, drums than any other way of originating ideas. But when I do bother to hook up a drum pad and put a full kit with a nicely sampled, multi-sampled velocity layered snare drum so that when I hit quietly, it sounds quiet, but it's also a sample of somebody hitting quietly. And when I hit the second note, it's a sample of another stick hitting. So there's left-right samples and velocity layers. You get this different expression. And I will say same thing from Simmons SDS-8 analog toms. You get this connection when you toms and snares and kicks, they're all the same voice modules on an SDS-8. You get this immediacy, that few milliseconds of lag and that recorded one-shot sound of a sample doesn't really confer. Different vibe. So sticks on an analog direct sound kind of thing, noodling along with your track, and I bet that would be, and I know you already have a different answer or the same one, a good way to break out of, open up some new patterns and rhythms that you wouldn't have thought of doing it, certainly programming on the grid.
Brilliant. Thank you, Adam. I can tell you're jumping on the bit. I just want to throw in really quickly, clap the beat out on. And the cool thing about clapping it and record it is that you are going to record your groove. So if you're going to end up using that clap, maybe try and line the drums up to where you were clapping, because there's groove in that clap. And then there's a big talk about clap tracks as well. I'm all about the clap track. Man, I haven't done a clap track in a long time. Adam, how's your mighty brain going on this task?
Well, I mean, I can think of a lot of tracks that I spin that break the 4/4. Although I'm gonna say, when you're talking about club music specifically, like, club music is pretty much disco no matter how you slice it. So, you know, I mean, it's, you know, very simple, you know, cats, boots and cats and boots and cats for the most part. However, to think of a handful of very specific tracks that have been very popular in the clubs, Zombie Girl, right? We Are the Ones. All right, that's a good 6/8. Is that the dogs here, or is that the dogs over on
That's my
somebody
dogs
else?
here. The
Oh,
neighbor's
okay, gotcha.
dogs are yelling at each other right outside my window right now. So I've got my
They
mic.
sound just like the dogs that bark outside my window, so I was wondering if it was my neighbor's dogs.
No. So I'm keep talking. I'm just
So I
you go.
apologize. Yeah, so you know, we were talking a little bit last week about, you know, using time signatures that are compatible to 4/4, like 6/8, right? You know, another good example of one that breaks out of the 4/4 a bit is Depeche Mode with Personal Jesus. Da-doom, got to doom. You know, a nice swung triplet in that. And I can think of a lot of songs that break the 4/4 format in terms of where they place the one beat as well. Like, there's a particular remix of Joy Formidable that was done by Inner Party System. And that one's cool because it changes where the one beat is a lot, and so it feels like more of a blues structure, like 6 bars instead of 4. I've used that trick myself doing some remixing. When I did the May O'Hara remix, her track is, yeah, I can't really remember I don't remember what I did. I don't remember what I did with that one, but it's a 6 bar structure instead of a 4 bar structure.
Okay.
Um,
I'm sorry.
Well, okay, so when you do that, when you use a 6 bar structure instead of a 4 bar structure, it changes the place where your hard one is. So instead of it being like a 16 beat or a 32 beat pattern, it's a 24 beat pattern, and so that can create some interest in there as well. Although I will say this, be kind to your DJs and give us some 4/4 in the beginning so that we can mix it with other shit, or a way that we can loop it, because it can be challenging otherwise. I mean, if you this is obviously, if you want it to play on a club dance floor, I mean, that's a whole nother subject of what makes something work for a DJ, but like, but those are a handful of examples that I can think of. I did a mixtape back in the early mid 2000s there called Shuffle Clutch. I guess that was around 2006. And that whole tape is stuff that is in triplets. So basically 6/8 structures. My point there being that there is a lot of good stuff out there. Because it's more challenging to mix and maybe not as common or whatever. I guess you don't hear it mixed as much, but certainly a track like "We Are the Ones" got tons of play either way.
Awesome, thank you.
Personal Jesus also,
Yeah.
indelible classic.
Rob in the comments is talking about Drumming at the Edge of Magic by Mickey Hart from the Grateful Dead. And it's it also goes into African drumming, and that is many chats. I'm going to throw it to you, Rezi, but Ivan, I just want to throw, like, after Rezi's done, like, if you feel like jumping in, because we were talking about ballroom dancing last week, ballroom dancing beats. And I actually threw one based on what you were saying. I threw one into a track, and it just, I think it saved the track, and then it goes to a 2/4. But if you want to jump in after Rezi at some point, because I would love to hear about this. Rez,
or before me, since you're on that. I mean, do you have a? I'll go. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, Carl, when you were just saying record your claps, there's one thing, taking your own groove and putting it into the song. Like, I feel like I don't use this nearly enough, but most DAWs have a really impressive drums to MIDI extraction tool. I'm talking about Ableton Live when I reference DAWs in my own work. But if you've got a couple of sound devices and you just want to bang stuff out, or use your own claps, or anything, and then just use the, right click on it and say convert to MIDI notes, you've got your own groove just right there to then apply to your samples or synth drums or whatever you want to put them on, and then you can edit it from there, or you can edit the audio loop first and then extract to MIDI. But you can definitely, there's a different approach that'll give you a very different result than doing it on pads or with sticks. Quickly,
I'm muted. Sorry, I'm muted. Hold on, I'll just say all that again. I'm muting because of the dogs. I'm sorry. A really good thing to do is dance. So when you're laying down that clap track or something, dance to that beat. I was saying that a really good instrument to have is a cowbell, and you're dancing with the cowbell. But then I said I don't want us to talk about that now, because it's ruined forever. I'm throwing it to someone. Looks like it's Razzie.
I read a kind of up in your head fartsy book from an engineer called Stavru, and I can't remember what it's called, but he has lots of techniques about doing physical things to influence your tracks. And what you're saying about dancing while you're doing the piece, he had some sort of a physicality trick for feeling your groove and tempo, which is just like moving something back and forth and feeling where the weight of it actually took over in inertia and stuff, and doing lots of things with objects in your hand, like checking out how that worked and, where on the beat you were feeling the change and stuff. So there's a lot that can be done with figuring out how to move your snare drum off the grid, just, from that alone.
Puppies. Yeah. So my my first love was the drums, and so everything I do musically kind of comes from that physical perspective. Like I write my drums like I would like to play my drums, even if it's simpler than what I would do. In fact, what I do a lot of times is I write my drums more complex than I actually use them later, if that makes sense. Like I tend, because I'm one of those cats that like loves to drum, I can be a bit of an overplayer. And so when I actually do my drum programming and stuff, I usually try to strip it down to the grooviest of the groove, and do that. And the physicality of that, as Carl is saying, like I absolutely do that. I totally dance. I totally groove when I'm doing it. Like I do it when I'm DJing too. And a lot of times when I'm DJing, you'll see me like going around in a circle as 1, 2, 3, 4 in my circle, but I totally concur with that. Like music is physical, and when we are creating music electronically, we have to think about the physicality of the instrument that we are programming as well. Like, we're teaching the robots how to play.
Hold on. Hi, I'm back. Thank you. Yes. A band that comes to mind is obviously The Prodigy. As far as like not always putting the snare on the 2 and 4, that a lot of their songs are not 2/4, and they have the funk. A really fun thing to do is get a drum loop and play it. So instead of hitting it on the one, so it's boom ka ka boom ka boom ka ka boom ka, hit it on the 2, and so it's boom ka boom ka ka boom ka boom ka ka boom ka boom, and already there's The Prodigy. And you can start getting some really interesting things when you start moving beats around, or not hitting it on the 1, hitting it on the 4 or hitting it on the 1 and then re-triggering it at certain places. Great fun. Ivan, I see your hand.
All right, snares. I'm primarily stuck with, it's all digital for me. So it's all on the grid, and I mean, it has just been a pain to make that sound good. Like, just the snare sound itself sounding like bad. Look at me using clean language. So there's that, and then like you just want to do stuff that like when I was in 7th grade, the place that I grew up in definitely had problems, but one of the problems was not that we got crap music education in public school. We got really good. And one of the things that we learned to play in 7th grade was a snare. It was required learning for everyone. And like, doing it with the grid, it's like, I know exactly how I would do this with sticks. And, with the grid, it's like, I'm boned. I can't be as expressive with that as I can with, could with sticks. Unfortunately, I do not have a setup to record that and get it good. Pulling the beat out of, converting it to MIDI though, like I kind of like that idea. But like I want to be able to get a good roll, occasionally. If you want to hear some really, really, really good snare, check out Kent. They were a Swedish band. Their last song, the song that they used to announce their like quitting being a band, touring, making album, the whole deal, was called Das Som Nu for Alted. And like the snare work on that is phenomenally good. I'll post a link.
So on the subject of I'm going to cover a little bit of what Ivan, a couple of ideas for Ivan as well. One of the things that you mentioned about Prodigy was how they shift where it is. So last week, again, we were talking about using the beat loops and stuff. So Prodigy is all about, at least in the early stuff, all about the sampling. And a lot of the, one of the very good tricks with a sampler is shifting the time off, delaying the start time, like what we were talking about with Blue Monday, to give it some time shift. They're brilliant at that. Please interject.
Rob. Okay, just me. Sorry. I've muted because I've got dogs going on. So I'm sorry. Adam, the floor is yours. I'm so sorry about that.
Oh, no worries, no worries. So another thing Ivan just had me thinking about there is using delays on your snare tracks, and it's a good. So earlier we were talking, like when I first logged in, Rozzy was talking about ghost notes, and delays are a great way to get a little ghost note off the back of something, so you get a little and Prodigy does this a lot, right? They're very well known for using the slap back delay. So but yeah, you can get a little with it, and then when you roll a couple of them, it's very cool, and you can pan that as well, which is neat. Other things to do, pitch the snare drums. So like if you've got a roll and it's getting faster, if you're playing on a real drum, the pitch actually goes up a little bit as you go into that roll and you get faster. So if you're using the same, if you're not pitching the drum as it goes up, it doesn't sound as natural, if that makes sense. So pitching the drum as it goes up in a roll, right? Let me see. I had one other thought there, and I'm trying to get back to it. Delays, pitching. Oh, reversing. So something again that we do a lot in electronic music is the right. So what you do is you take the snare, with the reverb on it, and you record the snare with the reverb on it, and then you flip it around and you put it before the hit, and you give it just a tiny bit of space, like less than a 16th, maybe a 16th, just a little bit of space, so that it goes, it has just that little bit of pause in between. And I think actually that just kind of sends me down another rabbit hole, which is a lot of times the space that you leave is more important than the space that you fill, especially when you're talking about grooves and getting that humanization. Oh, humanization. You do have a good tool for playing the drums. It's your Mac keyboard, man. Like the Mac keyboard. I play the drums on the keyboard all the time when I'm programming for that same reason. Like I can't really, it's like I don't really even want to think about where it's going to sit on the grid. I don't want to think about it that way. I want to think about it in terms of the way it's in my mind and in the groove. And so I'll just sit there and like on the keyboard, like just on that tiny little thing. And then I can go in and do all those things like Rozzy was talking about earlier, like messing with the velocity, fixing the quantization as I need to or not, you know what I mean? Doing, swinging it however I want, any of those kind of things.
Awesome. Brett, I'm sorry, Adam, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt you? That was brilliant. Razzie, I want to go after you. Thank you.
Yeah. So we've comfortably broached odd numbers now instead of all even numbers. And the concept of the dotted eighth note delay, so the space of an eighth note and a half, so 3/16 is, I think we all get a lot of mileage about that, but if you're that delay tail goes a long way toward simulating where some of those ghost notes are going to be. Bernard Purdy shuffle kind of thing, all the way to almost swinging it if you move the time off from strict dotted eighth notes. And another couple of beat divisions to really mess up your snare is using other tuplets, like obviously the any triplet, but you can also do like 5 tuplets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5. Put any of those other places, and you're going to be in a weird. Sounds like you're not quantized, but you can do it consistently. Land. I probably wouldn't ever divide it into 7 tuplets or 9s, but you can certainly do all that and slow it down. And I think on top of all that, everything's 4/4 if you don't count it like a nerd. In the words of many people, but most recently, Adam Neely brought that back up.
Thank you. Firstly, if you're going to do triplets, that is 3/16, a dotted eighth. Don't rely on the delays timing of it. Fudge it. Make it sound right. Don't actually find out what the number is and type the number, because you might end up with a really cool groove that sort of like goes somewhere. Secondly, Adam, thank you so much for bringing up some of the variations in snare sounds and stuff. If you don't have a multiple like layered sample of a snare, like Adam said, with velocity, add an itty bitty bit of pitch, and also open the filter a bit more too, so it opens up more, like it's a richer sound. So when it's regular, it's not too loud. A thought also is, what about 2 snares? Because here's a thought, is that we've been trying to figure out that dancing snare that's, what if you had a piccolo like a really 808 kind of snare, and it was doing a whole bunch of graces and a whole bunch of dancing, but then you had a big chunky SB12, big Lindrum, bam, just hitting your 2 and 4s, or the 4s only, and then in the chorus it goes into the 2/4. Just a thought. And Rob is suggesting there's a documentary called Let There Be Drums. I saw someone else's hand.
I had mine up a second ago, but I was going on a different direction. But when you mentioned the second snare drum, I that's table stakes for sure. Like there's always another couple of rhythmic elements in the track someplace that are kind of snare drum like, or are actual snare drums. So something from the 808, 707 snappy, thin kind of sound to do the really busy articulations between the beats, and then something that's like, a sampled heavy crack cannon shot snare on the 2 and 4, and the combination of those couple of things in groove and in production mix wise that's the percussion section.
And now we're starting to get into choices and sound design of a snare, and that's okay. Adam, thank you, Rezi. Adam, talk to me.
I'm concurring with the multiple snare sounds. I like to think I do it. I mean, I don't do it in like every track by any means, but I like to think that I do that a lot, where I'm different parts I'll use a different snare sound too. But I think that, again, that kind of comes from, mimicking what I would do live, which is hit the drum in a different way. I think it's a very common thing to do in electronic music production. I mean, my brain goes immediately to Tricky and the Massive Attack stuff, how like the different parts of the song would have very different drum sounds supporting them, and a lot of the texture in the percussion. I guess that gives a lot of texture to the percussion. Like a lot of the texture comes from those changes in sounds. But I do think that's a pretty common trick in electronic music in general. Like, use a beefier snare on the harder chorus parts. Obviously, like in dubstep through trap and all that kind of stuff, we get a lot of that using the pitched 808 sort of snare sounds to make those like almost comb like sounds, like when you run your finger down the comb, like right kind of thing. You hear that a lot. But yeah, definitely, even combining two snares on the emphasized beat, the 4 beat, if you will, in your backbeat. If you have one snare on the 2 and then 2 snares on the 4, giving it that fatter, flammier sound. Or one of the things I've done in a handful of the Angelspit remixes, right, is layering that clank over the 4, to make that beat harder, like 1 2 3 4, clank.
I love putting a great big 909 clap. It's become my go-to, and I've got a clap module. I always talk about the hex inverter mutant clap, and it's just so good. Maybe we're gonna start talking about actual sound design a little bit. Man, I find drums really hard. Gated, yeah, 1,000 times, yeah. But finding that snare drum, because you want that sort of like low end oomph, and also that really high end attack. The great thing about this module is obviously you can dial everything in, and it can be from a really pretty little 808 clap through to a kind of a dirty 909 clap to a what the hell is that. And you can also assign a random pitch, really slightly random pitch voltage on it, which is ever so slightly going to be changing the pitch of it. That's like my go-to for snare drums is the SB12, SB1200, and the Lindrum, and that clap. It's interesting. I don't use a lot of 909 snares. I just don't know why, and it's really interesting. I find it's hard to have like snares. I lie. I do use a lot of 909s. It's hard to find a snare that has a it's got body, but it doesn't have muddy. And I spend a whole bunch of time trying to, and I love distorting snares. Oh shit, am I muted? No, I'm not muted. I spent a lot of my time trying to get a snare really fat. And I don't know, man. It's something I'm still learning as the dogs keep going. Razzie, I'm throwing it to you and I'm muting my mic. If you guys...
Sure, I'll try to do that. Because you're not muted to us, so it's like, oh, you sound fine. As far as I was gonna just say, like, things to layer on your snare for sound design, and I've got some tracks back from my friend and contributing drummer Eric that he put the tambourine on the snare drum. Not one with a ton of jingles, but enough so that it was in there. And these are all techniques for making the very short sound a bit longer, I guess, in sound design of the snare drum. Otherwise, you've got a very short crack sound, and it sounds like it's FM radio in the 1970s, and you're recording it in a tiny room with no ambience. And the various methods of making that snare drum sound longer are compression, so that the amount of resonant time that the snare drum does have is brought out, the quieter parts louder, using some microphones in the ambient room that you're playing the snare drum in, so that there's 500 milliseconds worth of breath around it from the small room you're in. And of course, adding digital long artificial reverberation just to your snare drum, so that you've got 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds of a tail of that thing ringing out. Using distortion to clip the loudest parts, and thus you can bring the quieter parts down and get a very solid, not necessarily attacky, but present and full sound out of that drum. And adding just completely synthesized white or other colored and filter shaped noise under the snare drum hit to increase the duration. Thoughts?
I have thoughts. When I think about snare, so we again, taking it back to the kick drum conversation from last week, when I think about snares, I think about how are snares constructed and how would we mic them. So, miking the top of the snare, you get the beater head sound. Miking the bottom of the snare, you get more of the crack from the snares themselves on the bottom head, and of course more of the resonance from the shell. Bigger shell, more resonance, more deeper tone. Tighter head, more crack, more snap. So EQing your snares is a big thing anyway. All of those tricks that Rozzy just said, and then of course just layering. Like I just think snare layering is so important. And Rozzy talking about putting that little tambourine jingle on top there. Something that I do a lot of times with snares is I will add some other noise. I do it with the kick drums too. Like I'll use like the ping from a ride cymbal and mix that into my bass, my kick drum sample kind of sound. Like it's all compressed into the kick drum, right? And that's just to give it something higher in the frequency spectrum. But it doesn't have to be like a drum sound or anything. It can be, like literally anything, like sample the squeaks from the Psycho. Weet. It's a great, thing to put in there, but anything that gives it another layer into the upper frequencies, gives it more presence. Yeah, layers.
If I may. So Rob asked about, has anyone used a piezo mic taped to a snare drum? I haven't used, here's Alex. I haven't used a piezo mic, a snare drum. I've done a lot on metal, and I found that the trick is super low gain, because when piezo mics distort, they're not always pretty. And also, don't use a drumstick. Use a, if you've got like a mallet or something, because it's just, there's going to be so much clang in there. And if you hit the mallet, you're still going to get high frequencies, but you're going to get a lot more mid-low frequencies. If you whack it with a drumstick, all you're going to hear are highs. But with a mallet, it's a lot more beefy sound. And then, yeah, Razmix, welcome. Is that you? You're not Razmix. Okay, well, Razmix, welcome. 12-bit crushing on snares is amazing. I totally agree. And that's why I always go back to the SB12s and that stuff, because they're all 12-bit. And I do them specifically on the Emaxes because they cut through the mix so well, just like dogs. A question, does Carl tune each percussion instrument and make all the hits at the same, or vary the tune randomly? I vary it. So with drums, I purposely try and just... actually, whatever sounds good. Like, if I want it more deeper, I'll play it down lower. If I want it to sound more like a hi-hat, I'll play it up higher. So, yeah. As the dogs start, I'm going to pass this over to the Raz. And welcome, Alex.
Where are you picking up more of the chats right now? I have a couple windows open, but I'm not seeing them.
Rob's on YouTube.
Cool.
And there's a bit of amazingness on bloody Twitch. Go ahead.
Yes. Piezos on drums. Anecdote, I did a little experiment with a set of SDS Simmons pads plugged in directly to the audio interface to see what was coming off the triggers. And the problem with making drum sounds from what the piezos are picking up is it's an extremely, as Carl was saying, band limited and very short duration contact only kind of sound. They tend to work better for things that vibrate. If you put it on a piece of metal and pling the piece of metal and the piece of metal wobbles around for a while, you get these rich, interesting, fascinating sounds. But when you put the flat piece of metal and crystals on the skin of a drum, you kind of get an uninspiring sound. So the experiment that I was doing was to turn these clicks and pulses into something that sounded like a drum kit. And I achieved it, but most of it was through fully synthesizing duration with white noise impulses. So it became like triggering drums. Anyway, I don't know what that slip was about. So putting piezos on your drums is a lot like drugs, is what I'm trying to say. Most of the time, contact mics on drums is because it's short and controlled, not because it's inspiring and interesting. But if you want a challenge, hell yeah, put it on there. I think that's all. It's an interesting question and an idea, because those mics are so interesting and useful, and the fact that you can tape them to things that move around is usually a super interesting, the sound you get out. But I haven't found it to be too crazy interesting with drums.
And you can tape it to the cowbell while you're dancing around.
That's right.
So here's actually another cool thought, is that if you are taping it to an instrument, dancing around, set up a room mic as well. So you've got your piezo on one, and move towards that room mic and move away from the room mic. That might be really interesting.
Natural chorus.
Yeah.
Human Leslie speaker.
Yeah, and also you've got you're shortening the distance in the relationship between the wet dry mix as well, and you're also changing the frequency and volume of the sound too. I don't know. It's an interesting thought. Adam.
So I've never tried to use a piezo mic on a drum, so I was super interested. Thank you, Rozzy. What I have seen though, and fucked around with, is using a piezo to trigger from the acoustic drum to an electronic drum brain. It was maybe an old school kind of 80s-ish trick, but like, when you heard like Def Leppard out on the Hysteria tour, they were totally doing that. That's like all over the record. It's electronic drums mixed with the acoustic drums, and then when they were doing it live, they were triggering the drum brain with the acoustic drums. So you got that big, pour some sugar on me fucking drum sound. You know what I mean? Which is, by the way, a lot of fucking layers with white noise included in that as well.
If I may. So, my previous band, Jekyll Switch, we used to do that. We had a piezo on Adam's, I think his kick, snare, and tom. And we used to, the guy's a maniac drummer. And we had one of those pad 80s Mark II or something. I can't remember what it was. I had two of those things. They were great. And had one on the side. But we figured out a way, because piezos are so cheap, we'd make piezos and put them on little connectors, and because Adam would hit them and he'd go through like 2 or 3 in a show, because he's such a good drummer, maniac, and on the kick and everything else. And we used to set up a velocity thing on his kick, so only when he thumped that kick, like he hit it, it would set up this seriously sub like Prodigy kick thing going on. Great fun, man. Great fun. Alex, welcome. I want to hear your amazing face.
So when synthesizing snare drums, usually the noise part is fairly easy. I think I nailed that. But every time I try to do the tonal part, it sort of sounds cartoonish and silly. I don't know, do you put lots of pitch modulation envelope into it, or don't you? Or what kind of waveform do you use?
I thought is, if I can, noise, then distort it. So that there's actually 2 different noise things going on. One is that the snap of the snare, but the other one is that body, that really 909 dope body. That's also got a bit of pitch contour on it. But if you're using noise, you change. It's a filter, and remember to put high pass in there as well. So you're getting rid of the stuff you don't want. Then run that through distortion. It's a thought. Or another really fun thing to do is add a really short frequency modulated blip. So there's 2 oscillators, and one of them just gets this blip in there. And that's a frequency oscillated thing. I have that change. I see Rezzy's hand.
Yeah, I was getting deep into a nostalgia vibe with the trigger pads discussion, but then Alex, when you're talking about something more practical, like synthesizing a good sounding snare drum, and I think there's three components to me. I mean, the initial attack is separate from the body, separate from the resonant tail, and I think we've got the resonant tail figured out, and that's a white noise burst that tapers off. But the attack, Carl had a couple of good suggestions with using a very fast milliseconds long FM pitch bent thing, and then the body, I think there's a bit of a tone, 400 to 800 hertz, in there, like kind of a mid-range tone to it, and that's what you can then, if it's just a square wave, you can filter it, or if you're using a sine wave, then just change its volume. But yeah, with those three components, you get a good synthy classic Roland. There's actually a good white paper on exactly what blocks of circuitry go into making an 808, and it's not that we're all trying to emulate an exact 808, but that Roland put out, I think officially. Maybe somebody knows what this document is, but it talks about the synthesis techniques on each of the instruments in some of their classic drum machines, and it's very informative.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Adam.
Rozzy, you covered like literally so much of what I was going to come in and say, so that was fantastic. But a couple of further thoughts, like what Rozzy was just saying about that sort of middle tone. That's also where you can use your EQs and kind of pitch your drums, sort of tune your drums a bit. Give yourself a nice bump there and move that around a bit until you find where it lays into the I don't want to say in key with your song, but a harmonic to the key of your song. It's like, it's one of those things that when you hear it, you just kind of slide it around a little bit, that peak, and you go, there it is, because it sounds like it's in key then, so to pitch it a little bit. Another thing is like just using white noise is like almost every all the DAWs and that kind of thing, all the synths and the DAWs, there's somewhere in there's just fucking plain old white noise. And so you start with your plain old white noise engine, and it's random blips on all frequencies, and then you use the filters and the EQs and such to sculpt it, the envelopes, I think it's really, like, especially for the kind of stuff that you've been doing lately, and we can talk about your remix later if you want to. I did listen to it, I promise, I didn't forget. But with the kind of stuff that you're doing in electronic music, we use noise sweeps a lot, so like kind of things all the time. Combining them with cymbal hits is a big thing, because you can really control that sort of, like, tail of your cymbal hits. Using them with snare hits. One of the things I like to do with the snare hits is actually start with the noise frequency filtered lower, and then open it on the hit, so it goes right. So it starts off like, and then it ends like on a wider band, but you're doing it in such a short span that it just sounds like a pow, almost like right. And then of course it tails off into the reverb that you're using for the overall reverb of your tune. You mix it in so that it falls behind everything else in the reverb. So a couple of like learning to control white noise is like, oh my gosh, like it's so useful, because you can really create a lot of feel, a very subtle feel in songs, just by using white noise and using envelopes. And one thing that I always remind people of when I talk about white noise is that whispers are white noise. Whispers are white noise that is shaped by the envelope that is your mouth. Right. So you can literally create you can create a language with white noise if you are patient and sculpty enough, obsessive enough, I suppose.
That's
But yeah,
brilliant.
using noise is and controlling noise, controlling it in a mix is like almost I don't know how to say it. It's like it's so common in electronic music. I don't want to call it cliche, but it is so common in electronic music that that you really I really think of it as an instrument within itself. And I spend a shit ton of time usually at the end of mixing a track when I've got all my instrumentation and stuff done and all my arrangement done, then I go back in and I do the white noise, and that will take me days to do the noise treatments, to get all the sweeps and all the snare hits and all the things that I want. Like it's really like something that I consider an incredibly important instrument in my arsenal.
Cool. Hey, man,
Next.
thank you. That's amazing. Alex, talk to me.
Yeah, I think maybe I made some wrong assumptions, because usually I think of the components of the snare, a physical one, and it's usually the strings and the drum itself. And my logic was that because there's an actual drum, there must be a tonal component, but maybe I just need to ignore it. I don't know, or mix it in very quietly. Yeah, but I totally agree on the noise part. I think that's something very, very interesting. I think the best snare drums that I myself synthesized were one done with the soft tube modular, which was just a noise with filters closing, as you said, and the other one was with an emulation of the synthi.
Awesome. Hey, I'm sorry, Resi, just really quickly. Alex, if you're having trouble with getting the elements to work together, put them through distortion. And you don't have to have too much. And remember, there's a whole bunch of different types of distortion as well. Distortion might help unify things and accentuate some frequencies and get rid of other frequencies, that you choose to sculpt. But distortion is a great way to collide something together, or gently make it kiss, or make it absolute beef destruction. Razzie.
Yeah, starting with white noise is by definition the ultimate subtractive synthesis right there. Just in case it's not obvious to everybody, filtering things like sine waves and square waves, there's some upper harmonics and frequencies but contained within those sounds, but generally you hear it as a pitch. You go to white noise, and that's essentially some balance of Carl. Yeah, some balance of colors of pink and brown noise that are all frequencies represented in the whole spectrum. So it's now your job to start filtering and going nuts. And I know there's a couple of comments in the chats about this. And yeah, it's like, that's what you're starting from. All sounds, find different ways to filter them, whether you're using conventional EQs that have boost and cut knobs, whether you're using moving filters that are reactive to other things. So you're triggering your filter frequency position off something rhythmic, or I don't think you're going to get too much mileage out of using distortion units other than testing them to see what they're doing, because distortion tends to add harmonics to things, and we've already got all the harmonics in white noise. But it is a super comprehensive test of your filters to run white noise into them and then go from there and start building sculpting sound, subtracting, taking other frequencies out. And I can't remember exactly what I wanted to say about Alex to your situation, but something about the idea of physical modeling versus subtractive synthesis. And there are tools available. I remember the first physical modeling synth being a really expensive monophonic Yamaha tool from the 90s. But again, I'll go to Ableton. There are physics modeling devices within there where you can ping the end of a rod and hear what the results are if you stiffen the rod or change the materials or strike it in a different place. And there are membranes. If you strike a membrane, make it larger, smaller, dampen it, make it out of different materials. So as an experiment again, you might go nuts creating a snare drum out of like the 3 or 4 components of physically modeled objects, striking a thing, resonating a thing. And a matter of fact, there's resonating bodies also as a separate module. So if you're going to get super modular about the physics and actual components of a drum, you got a weekend's worth of fucking around there just doing it that way. It's an interesting thought experiment, if not practical one. I'm going to shut up, and I guess, Adam, you want to take it from there?
Okay. Yeah, I kind of agree with Rozzy in that, like, using distortion on white noise isn't most useful. Compression sure is. And I think that's kind of what Carl was driving at when he was saying, like, to throw some distortion onto the samples that you're working with, like layering your samples and then putting some distortion on it, because it will compress it. One of the things that you might have fun with, I have that collection of loops that Carl loves so much there. Take those loops, right? Run them through different types of distortion, cut them off for highs, cut them off for lows, and then layer them back together. Much fun. Try them through. And that's another thing too, is some of the Rozzy was saying about the body sort of things, like one of the distortions that comes in Reason there has these great body controls, and so you can change that that particular what was just I don't even parameter, but like you can change those parameters, but like it is like one of those things that is a je ne sais quoi. It's like, you know, when you hear it and you go, ooh, you know, it's just worth spinning knobs and messing with.
I just want to jump in real quick, and I love demystifying some of this stuff so that you can repeat it. And when you talk about a white noise that's not shaped yet, a compressor won't have anything to do, because that's a time domain thing. If we have a shaped sound already, then we can start messing with the stuff, just to throw that in. And similarly with, actually, I'll leave it at that. That was the one that came to mind.
Yeah, my thought on compression was more about the placement in the mix and how it plays.
Once you've already shaped your sound, you have to, exactly. Yeah, you know, crazy not to. Yes,
good clarifications, though. I definitely make assumptions. Diana has reminded me many times that I make a lot of assumptions.
Well, actually, the other one just came back to mind. When you're talking about body on a distortion, you're probably talking about a resonant frequency. So as it's distorting, it's going to accentuate certain frequencies more than others. And I know there's plenty of guitar pedals with a tone sweep where it'll basically pre-EQ your sound and force some of these things, or de-emphasize others to give you a sort of resonant thing. And that's, by saying resonant, I'm just saying between 100 hertz and 400 hertz, make those louder in your frequency spectrum, making it practical. I want to shut up.
I should
Carl,
try
you're
that.
Back.
Thank you so much, Rezi. I should try that. It's really funny, man. I spend so much of my time pulling everything around about 400 out, because that's my mud zone. I have much to learn. Alex, teach me something now.
I just quickly wanted to say that, yeah, I've been quite intrigued by physical modeling of drums. I really wanted to have a machine drum forever. I don't. There are apparently good tools for modeling drums in Pure Data, but I haven't checked that out yet. And another thing I wanted to say is that I made the experience that if you want to synthesize drums, it's good to pick a synthesizer where you can change the curve of the envelopes, like make it exponential or logarithmic or linear, and maybe even like drag a little dot around and completely change the way it changes. That makes so much different. I think that's also the what makes the Moog drummer from another mother so special, because the envelopes are tweaked for drums. because otherwise it's just a normal synthesizer.
Thanks, man. That's a really good point. Also, when you are creating drums on a synthesizer, make sure you my mic is on. Make sure you play with different waveforms as well, because what sounds great on a snare on a sine might sound incredible on a sawtooth or on a square. Excuse me. Let's keep this hot gravy train of meatloaf snare love going.
I actually, can I just ask Alex a quick question? If you don't mind. My question is actually about your goal with the snare synthesis. Like, are you trying to synthesize snare to use in recording specifically, or are you looking to use it as something that then you can use for live performances so that you're that you're like sort of freestyling your synthesizer, you're freestyling what you're doing on stage, not just playing back, like a prearranged kind of thing or what have you, like I do. So you're doing what Carl does as opposed to what I do, and creating your set live. But that's my question is, like, where's your goal taking you with that? Because, like, my thought, and this is why I'm asking, is that, like, you can create your snare sound, individually, like with nothing else going on, like just make snare sounds, right, and then load them back in as samples on a lot of things. But this is where my question lies, is like, what is the goal there that you're trying to achieve, that or is it like literally just the beloved geeky obsession of synthesizing the drum?
Alex,
I would say it's all three. The first thing that I usually do, and what I do most of the time, is just make a drum, sample it, then use it in my Groovebox as a drum voice. But I also sometimes just leave it in the DAW, make a drum loop, and then sample that. So I have like different velocity hits and maybe slightly modulating parts of the drum, so it sounds a bit more alive. And also you can randomize parts of it, so it feels more alive and more exciting. Yeah, that's basically it. And also, like, I also do it for the joy of synthesis.
For the joy of synthesis. That needs to be a kind of a Bob Ross spin-off. For the joy of synthesis. That's really awesome, Alex, man. Thank you. Can I just really quickly answer a question that Rob asked about the processing of the drums on the new Angelspit track, Pay the Butcher's Bill? So the drums are predominantly a Dave Nato Hazelwood from the Fourth Wall, who's now out on tour with the Anti-Nowhere League. Dave is so good. Oh my God, that guy's a maniac. And he gave me it was mixed by and recorded by Paul Cheese, who's also in the Fourth Wall. Excuse me. And what happened is they gave me the separated drum tracks, all mono, obviously. And they also, and it was regular kick, snare, hat, floor tom, rack one, whatever. So 2 toms, 2 overheads. They also put a U87 in the corner of the room and compressed the crap out of it. And what's interesting is that was what I used a lot. The U87 up under it, because it was very, very, very compressed and very dirty. And apparently they were just using it as like a mix mic to get a sound of everything in the room. And I just heard it and I went, oh my God. So I took all the lows out of that, like a high pass filter around about 120, maybe even more or something. I put a bit of a sculpt hole around about 400 again, because there was a lot of information going on in there. The rest of the kit was kind of pan normal, but I ran the snare through a Boss DS1 distortion pedal, and I ran the floor toms also through, I think, SD1 overdrives or something like that, and maybe a DS1. So they're distorted with old school distortion pedals. So every time and I put a hell of a gate on that snare as well. So, because the problem I was having is that obviously the snare also picks up hi-hats and everything else, and that all got distorted, and it was just too much. So I put really hard gates on everything, then gate first, then distorted it. So all the sounds are short and punchy. I did that with quite a few of the tracks. And what was amazing about Dave is that I said, just make it sound like war drums from Mad Max. Like war drums. And because of what him and Paul gave me back, there was just so much opportunity to fuck with shit. There is the kick drum is digital, the Angelspit digital kick drum. And there's a bit of Emax clanks and stuff in there as well. Just to kind of like... and that stuff, the clanks and the sequence stuff is quite hard quantized. Except the kick drum's got a pretty heavy triplet feel. It grooves to triplet just to... Because the song's got a real funk to it. It's only like 70, 80 BPM. It's very slow. But that was the process with that one. The process across the album is similar. There's kind of two types of tracks in the album. There's the Emax tracks, and then there's the tracks from David. A lot of the process was similar. I recorded drums where I had two Rode NT1s or NT2s or something, and I just stuck them above a drum kit like this. And I got the guy to hit it 5 times or 7 times. Hit everything 7 times. So I got the snares, the hats, close hat, open hat, crashes, and a floor tom. And the reason I said 7 times is that no matter how they turned out, I used them. Because the thing about rock and roll drums is that they're different, and every now and then there's a dud. And the cool thing is that the if it's 7, usually in a bar or in a sequence there's a division of 4. So if there's 7, they keep falling out by 1. So you'll never hear the same sample on the same beat for an extended period. And a lot of that was quite distorted and quite... I always... I did multiband compression on some of the sounds, and then the drum bus is a little bit of multiband. And I think that was it. Oh, and a little bit of limiting. Just a bit. But just to make them... I wanted them to sound balls. Like really, 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 really crazy fat. But that's the end of my life story. Rezi, what do you got?
First of all, Carl, I don't know what the situation is over there, but letting a U87 anywhere near somebody with drumsticks seems like a bit of a
oh no, it was in the
situation.
Corner. It was in the corner.
Well, it still might be too close. Okay. I was thinking maybe that was the crotch mic or something near the,
right.
the expendable one. The crush mic. Alex shared the service manual, and it's bringing tears to my eyes for a TR-808. Carl, maybe you want to pop that into the other chats. I don't know if anybody else's is. I
did.
Oh, cool,
actually,
cool.
I'll put it in there again. I'm sorry. Keep going.
Yeah, page 6 has the recipes for the individual instruments and a couple of charts for envelopes and stuff that they've applied to things. But it's just, I don't know why. This gives me, I don't know how to describe the feeling, but it's emotional reading this clinical description of the blocks in processing and how they've achieved some of the sounds. I mean, it's plain language. The high frequency range component is obtained by the above 1/3. IC3 is gated by Q27. It's just so dry, but so beautiful to hear what they to know these sounds so well, and to see these aren't exactly engineering design specs, but they're block descriptions of how some of the sounds are achieved with varying details per instrument.
Awesome. Thank you. Alex, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, first of all, the person running the site, I actually have met in person, funnily enough. He was very kind because I got lost at a synth meeting and I didn't find a venue, and he helped me find it. So thank you, Florian. And furthermore, I think I want to state the reason why I love synthesizing drums so much. The first one is that I rather spend the time tweaking a sound rather than searching through my sample library and finding the one that's right for my track. Second of all, it's sometimes even single hits get caught up by the content identification algorithms. And if you do your own stuff, you're a bit more safe, although not 100%. And the first thing is, I think it really gives your song character. For example, with producers like Sophie, she synthesized most of her own samples, and she has a sound, and I really like that. Also, one of the things I did with my first synthesizer is just make a sample drum kit, and I still use that because it has such a charm, because I didn't know what I was doing. It's clipping in places, but it has a sound. So yeah, that's the 3 reasons why I love drum synthesis.
Awesome, man. And another great reason is that you can, if the song's going and the EQ isn't right, you can tweak the actual sound itself. Brilliant, Alex. Thank you. Rezi, what you got?
Just a quick, reinforcement of Alex's philosophy on the uniqueness. I mean, on that spectrum of I used only components from one song construction kit to make my song, to I had a hand in sculpting and synthesizing every component that went into a song equally as complex. I mean, I'm certainly on the closer to the side of touch everything and throw away all the presets. It takes longer, but you end up with something that's your own fingerprints all over it and something that's uniquely you. And at least you've got that, and at least you spent a month dicking around with your sounds and can have something to show for it as personal gratification.
Awesome. We are here talking about snare drums. Does anybody else want to jump in at this point? Or do we want to fang on over to MTV TV and find something amazing? Okay. Diana, if you are there, let's start the rating process. I want to thank everyone for turning up. This has been great. I want to talk about hi-hats next weekend. Seriously, let's just keep this going because this has been amazing. Hold on. I'm putting in some links. Hold on. Here we go. So every Saturday we're here on the Art of Rock, and please join us. It's going to be brilliant. Sirens and dogs here. It's fantastic. Let's talk about hi-hats next week. And like I said, this is with help from Angelspit's Patreon, and I can't thank you guys enough. And let's go to MTV TV. This has been amazing, and I want to put up a pitch for MTV TV. Yeah, it's coming. Keep an eye on their Twitch because it's fantastic. And if you got some bucks, throw it to them on their Patreon because it's brilliant. You guys rock. You're amazing, and we will see you next week. And we're going to talk about hi-hats. All right, rock. Bye.